Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
School is back in session and the summer is over, or at least winding down. I'm Chris William, and welcome again to the most widely watched and longest running program on Carolina business, policy, and public affairs, seen each week across North and South Carolina for more than 30 years. Thank you for supporting this dialogue. In a moment, we will unpack what the fall may look like for all of our communities: inflation, student debt forgiveness, what about a recession, et cetera, et cetera. And later on in this program, he is the new chancellor at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. He joins us, and we will start right now.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Sarah House from Wells Fargo, Terik Tidwell of NC Ideas Black Entrepreneurship Council, and special guest Kevin M. Guskiewicz, Chancellor of UNC Chapel Hill.
Well, happy fall. School is back in session, or close enough. Sarah, nice to see you again. Terik, welcome to the program. Sarah, let me start with you. The Biden administration just rolled out recently what had been threatened for a while, and that was this idea of reducing or forgiving student debt. And sure enough, there is now a plan in place for up to $20,000 if you're a Pell Grant recipient and $10,000 for all others. So let's frame this, Sarah. What's the cost benefit of just wiping out maybe hundreds of billions of student debt?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we have to state that there's still a lot of uncertainty around this. So in terms of even how much of it will actually be able to take hold, not just the mechanics, but even some of the legality around it. So there are questions of that, but if we assume that this plan goes through, gets enacted, I mean, this could be meaningful relief for a lot of borrowers. So right now there's about 43 million individuals who have some sort of student loan debt. Median balance is between $20,000 and $25,000. And so there are income limits to who is actually eligible for that. But for a lot of borrowers, especially your lower income borrowers, perhaps borrowers who didn't finish college, this could be a meaningful relief that really helps their overall balance sheet and wealth position where this debt isn't hanging around them. And so from that perspective, it could be beneficial from a longer term spending standpoint, where particularly as the moratorium is now set to end in December, so payments begin in January, that could help in some ways kind of ease the hit to spending that we see next year from that moratorium ending.
Let me do a quick follow-up, and Terik, I promise I'm going to give you a chance to weigh in on that. Sarah, is the forgiveness of debt strictly by the numbers, it is inflationary or deflationary?
So I think on net, what we're looking at is probably, if this goes through and it's enacted as it's been laid out, I think it's probably going to be modestly inflationary, where essentially households will have more money to spend on current purchases, whether they're versus their past purchase of education. So I think when we look at not just the forgiveness, but there's talk of reducing the percent of discretionary income that under the income-based repayment plans. I mean, overall, this frees up cash and money to be spent in other areas of the economy. So I think on net, it is somewhat inflationary, but an environment of 8.5% inflation, I'm not sure it's really going to change the story or change the trajectory of inflation.
Terik, how does this, when you factor in how Sarah just described it statistically and almost academically about this, and you, as we all know, the partisan, just call it opposition for and against this type of forgiveness. Is this on net? Is this going to be a good thing? And I'm talking about student debt forgiveness.
Yes, this is definitely going to be a good thing. I mean, one of the things that I see this playing out, which is many folks who want to start businesses can't. And one of the most prohibiting factors has been student debt. So we look at low income entrepreneurs, their ability to launch a business has been hindered because of the fact that they have a debt. So this is going to have a net positive with maybe even more folks who are looking to launch a business and create some additional tax revenue for those different economies. So this is going to have a different opportunity and impact in those different communities as they launch their businesses.
And I know you're not insensitive, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but how do you answer critics that say, well, I should have waited 6 more months and I could have wiped out my debt, or why is this not fair when I had paid my debt, or I went to the GI Bill and I gave my some service to the country? I mean, how do all these arguments against the idea, do they carry weight? Is there some semblance of an argument against it?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely some legitimacy on both sides related to, I've paid my debt in full. You should pay yours, right? Sure. So I think the matter is just find out what's fair and what's just. And I think that's going to be the hardest part, which is find out what's fair and what's just. And it may show up in other different areas, which may mean for folks who may own mortgages or homes, this may show up where there may be policies impacted or introduced that may support those different folks who may be coming from different perspectives.
Sarah, let's look at the broader economy. Not surprising, here we are on the eve of not just Jackson Hole, but what the Fed is going to be doing about inflation. Broader, when you look at the Carolinas, when you look at the broad economy of the United States, what is your biggest concern? Is it inflation? Is it rising interest rates? Is it debt levels? What do you look at and say, yeah, but this is really the thing that we ought to be watching?
I think it is inflation right now, given that we're still seeing prices rise at roughly the fastest pace in 40 years. And that's making it so difficult on households, on businesses to plan to, they're having to spend more time on thinking about their purchases decisions. So for businesses, do I make this investment? Am I going to get the return if I'm not going to be able necessarily to pass on my costs as much? For households, it's a matter of, okay, so where, can I afford to buy this? Where can I afford to buy it? That's time that they could be spending on more productive endeavors. And so I think that is a huge issue hanging over the economy, and it's the number one focus of the Fed. And so that does lead to interest rates becoming a weight on the economy as the Fed does try to actively slow growth to rein that inflation in, so we get stability where we can plan and grow in a more sustainable way.
Terik, what do you think?
Well, I mean, there's a lot where, when I think about small business, I think about entrepreneurs, I think about folks who are looking, even from the investor perspective, which is we're starting to see investors pull back. So that means that their ability or willingness to invest is actually coming a little bit lower, where folks are thinking about, well, I'm starting a business, but am I going to be able to have access to capital? So this is really hurting some folks when they're thinking about business, thinking about starting up or thinking about investments. You're looking at the return, the opportunity, and how long you're going to take before you get that return. And these are going to be much more, mitigated as much with all the different inflationary costs.
So in your world, Terik, and you know a little bit something about innovation, not just through NC Idea, but other things. Are you seeing investors, and I'm using that term broadly, are you seeing folks that are building businesses, investing in businesses, are they becoming reticent about making CapEx at this point?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you're always going to be sensitive to capital. I mean, one of the most things is runway. In fact, some investors are telling some of their own entrepreneurs, saying, listen, you may need to extend your runway because we will not be providing you a bailout should you have any kind of indication that your business is not going to be working. So I think this is going to be something for investors that are looking, saying, we're going to wait until Q3 of next year to make any kind of investments. And then if you're looking to have an exit of your business, or say, we're going to have a sale of this business in the next year, we want to make sure that our investors are going to get a good return based upon that kind of capital that was deployed. So it's impacting everyone.
Okay. Just a reminder, I heard a notification. I mean, how could you not hear that notification? Whoever has that on your computer, and I know it's not me, make sure you silence that, please. It is a little overbearing. Sarah, let me come back to you on something. So housing, commercial real estate. Both of these loom very large in this economy, and all of us, if you own a home, it'd be hard pressed to think that you haven't at least gained something somewhere at some market. Speaking to some commercial real estate people recently about urban core vacancy rates, they are climbing and I know specifically to Charlotte because I just recently had a conversation offline with a commercial real estate person who said uptown vacancy rate in the Carolinas' largest city was around 20%. And he went on to say, yeah, but the whisper rate is about 40%. And I had to ask him to repeat that. And what that means, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, is that's what people are afraid of, because not just is the current vacancy rate high, but with whatever the new working model is and with ever the new capacity of building that we've all been seeing, that a vacancy rate could be much higher than what the current posted rates. Number one, do you agree with that? And number two, what is the risk for those type of high vacancy rates?
Well, I think what we've seen is if you look at the back to work barometer, so just the number of badge swipes that we're seeing in office space. So, across most metro areas, it's only roughly 50% of what it was before COVID. So you can see that under this new model that businesses don't necessarily need the same amount of space, especially if you can share some of that space depending on, depending on when your workers are coming in. So I think as we have nationally at least seen net absorption continue to rise the past couple quarters, it's nowhere near what we were seeing before. And that's because I think you do have a lot of businesses rethinking their footprint. And as office leases come back up for renewal, that you do have this longer term drag from the pandemic where, look, that space was still under contract even during the worst of the pandemic, but we're in a different environment, right? And so that's going to potentially keep the vacancy rate elevated, perhaps even sending it higher. And of course, we also have a lot of new office construction in uptown Charlotte as well, contributing to that dynamic as well.
And I know there are a lot of things on this in about 20 seconds, Sarah. How long of a tail do you think how long would it take to have that type of vacancy rate absorbed in any market? And I don't mean just Charlotte, but any urban core here.
I mean, I think it depends where we land on work from home and the hybrid environment. In many ways, it's still kind of untested of what's the longer term benefits. Does it actually help productivity? So I think the jury's still out. Where right now there's a lot of push for it from workers, but come the next downturn where workers maybe don't have as much sway, businesses might have a little bit more pull, and you might see more need for office space if that's the direction businesses want to go.
Our guest is a nationally recognized expert on sports-related concussions. You remember the movie a few years ago with Will Smith about concussions. Our guest knows something about that, but that's not why he's here. However, that training might come in handy. He is the Chancellor, the relatively new sheriff in town at UNC Chapel Hill. We are glad to have the Honorable Chancellor Kevin Guskiewicz. Chancellor, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So, Chancellor, here we are, beginning of a new academic season. It seems that the commencement of this new season is now post-pandemic. Do you feel like it's normal? And what does normal look like now on a college campus?
Well, it's a lot closer to normal than we've had the past few years. We're really starting this semester in an exciting place, certainly different from where we've been the past few years. And we've learned a lot from this COVID experience and how to offer quality in-person learning and conducting our research. We've had to adapt. And I think that's part of what a great global public research university does. It teaches society how to adapt. And I'm proud of where we are. We've learned a lot over these past few years, but I think we've come out of this experience stronger and more resilient.
Do you get a sense that the student body and faculty, that the morale is where it was 2.5 years ago?
Oh, it's even better, I would say. I think some of it's just, they realize what we've been craving. And as I look out my window at the old well here, just a lot of smiling faces on campus and a lot of happy people making up for some lost time. I spent a lot of time out and about on campus over the past 2 or 3 weeks and welcoming students back. And, that last year's senior class, and I had a son in that class, they missed, about half of their college experience due to this, at least in the normal way that it should have been experienced. And so I'm reassuring everybody that we're going to make up for lost time, and it's going to be a great year.
Mm-hmm. Terik?
Great to have you, Chancellor. I'm just curious, with so much happening within higher education, college affordability, how should universities be looking at how to make their education more affordable?
Well, one of the things I'm really proud of at Carolina is that we've been, we've had flat tuition for 6 consecutive years at Carolina. My guess is that we'll have probably flat tuition again this coming year. We'll be working on some of those decisions here alongside our UNC system colleagues and the Board of Governors over the next several months. But we have for over 2 decades now been ranked as best value among publics across the country at Carolina. Very proud of that. We've done our best to keep student fees as low as possible. We're certainly entering a period here where we're going to see the effects of inflation, though, the sort of unprecedented inflation that we've seen over these past 2 quarters, and what the impact that may have. But we're committed to this. It's part of our charter at Carolina to provide high quality education and to be as affordable as possible. Our Carolina Covenant program allows students to graduate from Carolina as debt-free as possible. It's an incredible program. Nearly 20% of all of our undergrad students at Carolina come through that Carolina Covenant program. And so, these are students who come from, they're first-gen students, students that come from families with median incomes less than $30,000 for a family of 4, and they graduate pretty much debt-free. And we're proud of that. Our capital campaigns allowed us to raise money to help ensure that affordability.
Sarah.
Yeah, so you touched on this briefly in terms of, you guys are facing rising costs too. So we think so much about the inflation environment right now, and there's so much talk about supply chains, how much goods consumers are buying. But, even a service provider like you guys providing the service of education has goods that factor into that input cost. But also, of course, we're facing a very tight labor market. So you can talk a little bit about how your input costs have gone up, and how the inflation we're seeing right now isn't necessarily just a goods phenomena.
But we're worried about it. We're seeing and that's why I mentioned with student fees. I think that we're going to be reevaluating, the cost of doing business. And so those services that fees provide, whether that's a student health fee, whether that's for services in our campus recreation facilities, or any of the clubs and organizations. And so we have to, there's that increasing cost comes at an expense to someone. And so we're doing the best we can to keep student fees low. But again, we're doing everything that we can. We're very fortunate to be in the coming down the home stretch of a very successful capital campaign, a 7-year campaign, and proud that we're getting close to a $5 billion. We've exceeded our goal, but we're raising $1 billion towards student aid and scholarship that will help offset some of that inflation. But we're going to have to make some adjustments downstream.
Chancellor, you talked about student debt, and certainly a lot to be proud of at UNC Chapel Hill around the best value. Money Magazine, of course, just came out with another list, and Chapel Hill was ranked number 2 as best value and highest quality, et cetera, et cetera. Student debt. Obviously, the Biden administration just is released this idea of student loan forgiveness. With just straight up, how do you feel as a parent who has kids in the system or has had kids in the system, and certainly what you do in your day job? Should we be canceling student debt? Is there another way to think about this? Should it be a larger amount of debt? Should it be less? How does all this kind of flesh out for you?
I think there's something needed to be done. And what sort of came out earlier this week, in my opinion, I think it was a middle of the road approach. We'll see. Again, I think it's going to be what are the downstream effects. There's as you've seen that those dollars add up to a lot. Where's that going to, come from? And I do think that we'll have to look at that. We have one of only 2 public institutions in the country that are fully sort of need blind in our admissions process. So we admit our students and based on their merit, and then we figure out how to help get them here. We learn after the fact, after they decide to come, what sort of student aid financial support they need, and our hope is we can continue to do that. But I think this potentially is will challenge that. I think at many universities. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Terik, please.
Let's switch a little bit, change conversation a little bit. Universities have been engines for innovation and engines for entrepreneurship. as we look at this in terms of with the new passing of like National Science Foundation, the Science and Chips Act, how should universities position themselves to enabling more innovation and entrepreneurship within their community?
Well, I love this question because this is something that we're really proud of. In March of 2021, we launched the Carolina Economic Development Strategy to position us to act as a sort of a catalyst to retain and attract and grow more innovation and oriented companies and talent here to Chapel Hill and to our campus. We've got world-class researchers. We just brought in $1.2 billion this past year alone in research, and industry wants to be rubbing elbows, wants to be close on campuses like ours to try to learn from one another and to help, hopefully, help commercialize that research. So we recognize our role as Chapel Hill's largest employer, and we work with our alumni, our business and research partners to help successfully implement this new strategy. I've got a new downtown economic development council, and we're building out an innovation hub that will connect the downtown right up through to our campus. A lot of our work is in the biomedical area. That $1.2 billion, probably half of it comes from biomedical research, and that innovation corridor will extend right through from downtown up through the main part of campus and over to the medical school and the world-class scientists we have on that side of campus. So I'm excited about it, and I think it is a responsibility, and we want Chapel Hill and UNC Chapel Hill to be the anchor institution for driving the economy of this region. And we'll do it.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, you got about 2 minutes.
So one question I have is, we're looking at a historically tight labor market. So what are you hearing from employers that the university works with in terms of what they're looking for from you in terms of pipeline, but also just, what are the skills that you're hearing from employers that are most in demand that you're trying to get your students ready for?
Yeah, so we are right now in the process of sort of revamping, reimagining our career services division to try to better understand that labor market. Better, internships have become so important right now. We have about almost 20,000 undergraduates now at Carolina, and my goal is that the vast majority of those 20,000 students get an internship experience, because that's where they learn, see those career paths and options. We're reworking, as I said, career services, but I also want to emphasize we're trying to do everything to retain our top talent here on campus. So it's, sort of upward mobility and creating those sight lines for new career options for our students is one of our top priorities, but also creating opportunities for upward mobility of our top talented staff and faculty here at Carolina is a priority, because industry is coming in, as you know, and there's a lot of opportunity out there beyond our campus, and we don't want to lose that top talent.
Chancellor, we got about 2 minutes left. I know somewhere in the description of what the Chancellor's job is on any of you or your contemporaries across the UNC system is probably not political traffic cop, but that is a reality of the job. And Chapel Hill is a unique animal. It is probably the historic public university that is probably right in the middle of some very oppositional ideological polarization. You've got a fairly liberal school. You've got a fairly conservative General Assembly. I'm not asking you to take sides, but how do you manage through? There's a group called the Carolina Coalition for Carolina, which are faculty. But how do you manage a public dialogue about ideological things that is fair to both sides, and that you move forward as a school and as an academic institution? How do you do that?
Yeah, this is what great global public research universities do, like UNC Chapel Hill. Our role, Chris, should not be to promote a political agenda, but to promote academic freedom and expression that must be front and center. And I've been in a lot of conversations, as you can imagine, over the past 5 or 6 weeks about this. And our leadership team is going to continue to discuss how we fulfill that responsibility to be a place where ideas and opinions are argued and tested and freely expressed. And at times, as I think there's always going to be a healthy tension on the campus of a leading global public research university like ours. We don't shy and run away from controversial topics. We have world-class faculty that study these issues. But as I said in the campus message a few weeks ago, our board of trustees voted to approve a resolution reaffirming our commitment to academic freedom and emphasizing our university's respect for free inquiry and the obligation to cherish a diversity of viewpoints. And so that's what I said in that message, is reaffirming our commitment to this. We'll be that place that will help, we'll have civil discourse. We have a relatively new program for public discourse. Just went to an event they held last evening. And I think it's taken it's taken life on our campus, and I think it has a real strong presence and will make a difference in helping to inform policymakers and probably bring some people to the middle on some of these issues.
Okay. All right. Chancellor, thank you for joining us. Please do come back. I know there are a lot of things we didn't unpack. And by the way, best of luck going forward with Mac Brown and the football team, because, App is not a rollover. So good luck.
Oh, let me tell you, that is going to be a great weekend over there.
No doubt.
I hope we come home with a W. But
yeah, good luck. Good luck. Chancellor, thank you very much. Terik, good to see you. Please come back. Sarah, always nice to have you. Until next week, I am Chris William. Happy weekend. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Sonoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.